how do you like to be called by the CEO of your favorite game company? A fool? An idiot? Maybe a sheep? I'm pretty sure all of these epithets aimed at players are basically mandatory if you want to run a serious game company in 2026. A company that instead of giving players the entertainment is designed to reap the very last coin out of your pocket, no matter how it gets there. Recently, I came across a very interesting article, and using it as a reference point, we are going to talk about what's currently happening in the games industry. Everyone's welcome, let's get into the video. Ever since the infamous horse armor, game companies have been competing to come up with more and more aggressive ways to monetize their games. That happened because we were given several incredible games, even entire franchises, that allowed publishers to grow into the massive behemoths we know today. We had Mass Effects, Assassin's Creeds, Call of Duties, and other brands that won players' heart with innovation and compelling stories. Those were the times where you genuinely had to think about what to play next, because every game was its own unique adventure, something that stayed with you long after you finished it. Ironically, it kind of looks like the same today, except now it's because of inflation, rising production costs, corporate policies, and other factors pushing game prices toward the $80 launch price barrier. But anyone who has played more than one game or, God forbid, bought the new Call of Duty knows that the spending doesn't stop there. We have loot boxes, multiple currencies, microtransactions, DLCs that add things that should have been in the game at launch, battle passes, and a million other ways to manipulate players into spending their last money on a single product. And on top of that, subscriptions are getting more expensive, taxes are going up, food costs more, and suddenly you realize that within a year, you can only afford some of the games that came out. And that's just now, because let's not forget that GTA 6 is coming, and supposedly it's going to push that price up to $100. And this is where the real meat begins, because in an interview with Greg Reisdorf, a former creative director who worked on games like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, World War II, or Black Ops Cold War, we can hear that all the publishers are waiting for it, and that you don't want to be the first person to raise the price. We already had the example of The Outer Worlds 2, which, as a game criticizing capitalism, no less had to launch at $80. And that didn't go well for them. On one hand because the game was bad, and on the other hand because they had to change to $70. And that's actually a glimmer of hope, because afterwards games like Resident Evil Requiem and Nioh 3 announced $70 prices as well. There's also the Nintendo and Mario Kart case, but as we all know, Nintendo spits in the faces of its fans and they thank them for it, so that's a special case, let's say. What won't be an exception is GTA 6, because everyone is waiting for Rockstar to release it, because regardless of the price, that game will be a launch day success. I guarantee you that there is no scenario in which this game will sell badly. There's no denying that a massive number of players will gladly pay $200, $300, as much as possible for special editions and so on. That's why publishers are extremely cautious around dates close to GTA 6 release, because it's basically a black hole. Every gamer will spend their money on GTA 6 and they will not have money for anything else. Greg even wonders whether Call of Duty will follow in their footsteps. Because Greg doesn't make games anymore. No, he moved on to his true passion. The same passion that drives most corporate executives. And the same one that turned Ubisoft games into copy-paste templates for years. Making money. Money, I got money, I got. According to a Newzoo report, 58% of PC game revenue in 2024 came from microtransactions. And that's exactly what Greg's company, Oncade, focuses on. Hell, in 2009 even Bobby Kotick himself, former head of Blizzard, publicly admitted that his goal is to take all the fun out of making video games. I like to call this phenomenon a financial Sweet Baby Incorporated. Just as Sweet Baby Incorporated, driven by progressive ideology, helped destroy narratives to appease minorities, Oncade, driven by financial motives, helps destroy fun in games to satisfy shareholders. Like, seriously, if you read the entire article, you might even get the impression that the most beautiful thing about games is monetization. After all, there are so many new technological possibilities that didn't exist before. And once these practices make it into small games, they become normalized. Thanks to the argument, oh, everyone does it, Apparently, it's no longer enough that these toxic practices are destroying the high-budget games market to the point where developers are replaced by psychologists and UX designers are replaced by marketeers. It's not enough that big games use so-called dark patterns, like in Diablo 4 where opening the shop could accidentally activate your season pass. Now they are trying to push all of these wonderful tricks into indie games and smaller titles like Expedition 33. It might turn out that very soon the only thing saving players will be the goodwill of developers themselves. And we know from experience that it's not something that you meet often. And we can already see the effects because players are skipping the new releases in favor of older games. As I mentioned before, I'm personally playing through Mass Effect trilogy from the first game for the first time in my life. And I know that some of you are now jealous that I got to experience this story fresh. But the stats are brutal. On Steam in 2025, players spent only 14% of their time playing new video games. In large part, this is probably due to lack of funds. People would rather wait a few months for prices to drop. Also, the piracy is coming back, which is great, reportedly responsible for 75 billion in losses in 2025, though we don't know how much of that comes from games. But can you really blame players? When you buy a game, you see that the game is being praised everywhere and then you play it and it turns out to be a fucking joke. Or you're buying a game and it turns out that on your specific case, on your specific PC, it's so bugged that it's an unplayable disaster. Greg mentions that when he worked on Call of Duty, at some point the game was making so much money that they simply didn't care whether creators earned anything from referral links. And it is safe to assume that this exact philosophy applies to every element of the game that doesn't generate revenue. Character design? Better spend that money on new skins. World building? Give it to the intern. They'll manage. Every company sacrificed pieces that once made it unique until all that remained were empty shells no one actually wants to play. At Activision, they even had a term for this regarding Call of Duty. They called it the content treadmill. And that's exactly what EA is trying to do now with Battlefield 6, but they have some problems. Basically, it means flooding the player with content so they always have to run, always chase the next thing, always lag just slightly behind, and feel they need to catch up. The content doesn't need to be original. At some point it can't be. You can only spit so many ideas in a limited time frame. What matters is that the player is always busy, always coming back, and always spending money. And our friend Greg divides these players into two groups and finds value in both. The first group has money and time. They not only have a time to consume all the shit pumped out by Activision machine, they want more. They actively buy skins, battle passes, and every scrap their favorite developer throws at them. But what about players who have time but no money, you'll ask? Great question. I'm glad that I have such an intelligent viewers. For those players, Greg sees a different use. They can create content for players with money. One example he gives is the Counter-Strike market, where players voluntarily and for free, create content that ends up in CS2 cases. Steam then takes 15% of every transaction, even though the money stays within Steam anyway. This is a game publisher's wet dream, a closed system where players create content for other players and you just take the profits. By the way, Rockstar's GTA Online is also mentioned, generously allowing players to add their own content. But it doesn't stop at content. Where there isn't content, you become the content. I'm talking about skill-based matchmaking, designed with revenue in mind because, as everything added to the game, must serve that purpose of generating money. Greg openly states that one of the goals of modern skill-based matchmaking is monetization. In a world built by dead Excel spreadsheets, there can be no imbalance. The player must constantly receive dopamine from killing weaker players. But wait, the player would quickly get bored if he would win every single match, and that's why you need a counterbalance, stronger players, so the pendulum is always moving. Dopamine keeps players engaged, losses motivate them to keep playing. As Greg himself says, you've gotta keep the sheep available for the wolves. And you might think that sheep are weak players and wolves are the strong ones. No, don't fall for that interpretation no matter how much he would like you to think so. A sheep is basically any player who willingly accepts these abusive practices without a word of protest. And the wolves, of course, are publishers and shareholders stuffing their pockets with every dollar that you spend in their shop. All while posting record profits and record layoffs. In the last year, Ubisoft confirmed that 1,500 employees were laid off as a part of cost-cutting measures, including around 700 since March 2025. At the same time, the company boasts about being a year ahead of plan, on 200 million in savings by 2026. Now to Electronic Arts. Between 2023 and 2024, EA laid off around 5-6% of its global workforce, so basically nearly 1,400 people, while still reporting high revenue. As analysts note, despite record revenues in some quarters, EA continues to cut jobs. You might ask, why can they afford this? Greg helps to answer that too. There's one major problem with making games this large: QA, quality assurance. Games are massive, and as the Greg says, if you're a super conservative team, you want to test everything, but I say, let's just push it out. Make sure we have a way to turn it off. If there is a problem, we turn it off. And now the fucking part that made me fuming. Then the community will say that now we are QA testers, but you either want the change or not. I just bet that he said it with such a tone. That statement triggered me even more than calling us sheep. So companies want to use players as cheap labor to create content for unfinished games, as punching bags so better players don't get bored, and on top of that, they want to use them as unpaid testers. If you ask me, that should spark a protest, at least, in a way of not buying games, because that approach is already painfully visible in modern games. Either you want to change or not. Bro, like, you're the one calling, you're the one expecting us to spend $80 on your game, and then you tell players that they can't expect quality content unless they test it themselves and submit bug reports?
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Thankfully, there are still companies like Sandfall Interactive that don't shove microtransactions in their games. And even they are getting bashed for the stupidest of reasons. And we have also studios like Larian who respond to rising RAM prices by, you will not believe this, by optimizing their games. Instead of expecting players to buy better PCs to play their game because their game is so amazing that you should spend all of your money, buy the best computer, and only then buy the game. And let's be honest with each other, on top positions at companies, on the decisive positions at companies, there is many people like Greg. People who destroy our favorite franchises. Cheered on by idiots claiming Assassin's Creed Shadows must be good because it sold well. And that's a definitive proof that this game was actually good. And cheered on by people who need only Black Ops 7 to finally realize something is wrong with Call of Duty. Maybe we are sheep, but we don't have to mindlessly consume this slop sold to us by greedy corporations. So I have one request for you. When you buy your next game, stop for a moment. Maybe you will not play this game right now, so you can wait for a sale. Maybe you don't need it at all, like why you should play this game. So many times I caught myself thinking, I want to play this game, I really badly want to play this game. And then I actually thought why I want to play this game, and then I was like, wait, I want to play this game because it's popular, not because I will enjoy it. I will probably turn it off after a few hours. And I'm obviously not talking about GTA 6, because I know that we will all jump on that at launch, myself included. But I can assure you that many companies will try to follow, setting the price at $100 and thinking, maybe someone will buy it, maybe it will not be so bad, and all of that with unfinished games. And that's why I hope that together we can make sure that they will fail. And if you watched until this point, thanks a lot, because you're in the 12% of people who watch my videos fully. So thanks a lot once more. I will not ask you to like or subscribe. I will just thank you third time, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.